You know, if you ever like the music on this show, you should thank Dave Kimber for just absolutely crushing it. I got a message yesterday. Somebody said, I think it was their child. They said that their kid loved it. We've been playing absolute bangers every time we come in and out. Thank you, Dave. It's always so fun. I always get pumped when the music plays. Great to have you with us today, 507 here, WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. President Trump sitting down with a full town hall of all women in Georgia yesterday. They aired it today on the Fox News Channel. It was hosted by Harris Faulkner, and he got a very warm reception. Here's Harris Faulkner asking the crowd, hey, who's worried about biological boys playing girl sports? Take a listen to this.
How many of you are worried about biological men and boys competing against women and girls in sports? Just show me. That's almost that is the entire room. And I know you have a question.
I do.
By the way, excuse me, it's so crazy. It's so crazy.
Your question, your name, and your hometown.
My name is Linda, and I'm from Milton, Georgia.
Good.
But originally Brooklyn, New York.
Oh, wow.
I'd get that
good.
in there. My question is, how do you plan on addressing the transgender issue in women's sports? I have 9 grandchildren, 6 of them female, all playing sports, and we are very concerned for their safety, not just on the field and the courts, but in their locker rooms as well.
Right. It's such an easy question, and everybody in the room, and you know that answer, we're not going to let it happen. You look, just yesterday, they had a volleyball match. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Where a person that transitioned, okay? We have to be very careful because this can terminate your political career if you say it's slightly off, all right? But transitioned from man to female and was on a volleyball, and I saw the slam. It was a slam. I never saw a ball hit so hard. Hit the girl on the head. But other people, even in volleyball, they've been permanently, I mean, they've been really hurt badly, women playing men. But you don't have to do the volleyball. We stop it. We stop it. We absolutely stop it. You can't have it. It's a man playing in the game. I mean, physically, from a muscular standpoint, even if it was a little bit less, maybe they do all sorts of tests and drugs and everything else. Look at what's happened in swimming. Look at the records that are being broken.
So how do you stop it? Do you go to the sports leagues? Do you go to the Olympic
You just ban
councils?
it. The president bans it. You just don't let it happen. Not a big deal.
The left is excoriating him for that answer right now. For more on this, I want to bring in Mary Rooke. She's a commentary and analysis writer for the Daily Caller, and she joins us on the phone. Hello, Mary.
Hey, Vince, how are you?
I'm doing great. Okay, so that question and answer, and there's a whole bunch of them today as President Trump was speaking to these women, I thought was great. The left is attacking him today, calling him a dictator, but correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't it the Biden-Harris administration that said Title IX doesn't actually protect women? Men can be women now?
Exactly. You know, as I was listening to him say his answer and he was saying, as the president, I'm just going to ban it, I thought this is exactly what the left has done over the last 4 years. They've just allowed the president to just kind of sign his pen and say this is how we're going to deal with things. And so, of course, they'd come out and say, oh, no, he's a dictator. He's going to come out and, rule us with an iron pen, which is exactly what they've been doing, except for in Trump's case, he's actually going to be helping Americans. I mean, this town hall was really representative of a lot of the mothers that I talk to on a daily basis, including myself. I have 4 daughters. And every single time they go out onto the field or the court, I am now looking at the other team to make sure that they're not playing biological men against them, because I don't want these types of things to happen. My kids play volleyball, they play soccer, they play basketball, and those sports you can get injured terribly if you have someone who has a physical advantage over you. And I thought he answered it great. You could tell by the roaring applause that he got from the women in the audience. They really appreciated his stance against it. I mean, we're done. We're tired, and we need help.
Yes.
Legislatively, we need help from the federal government to say this is insane. We're going to stop it. And we're going to protect our girls.
You know, what was interesting about this town hall was that it included the broad array of issues that women and all Americans actually care about. And it wasn't just centrally focused on abortion. One of the things that the media do is when they say that they want to address women's issues, It turns out that the only issue they're even interested in talking about is how do we prevent women from having more children?
Right. And I talked about this in a piece I wrote yesterday about how, Harris's campaign has this obsession with abortion, thinking that this is the only issue that Americans care about. But as you saw in the town hall today, most of the questions were on safety, the economy, how are we going to, boost Americans as a whole. And I thought it was really great. If you have watched any of the Harris campaigns, like town halls or questionnaires that she's gotten from people, it really does largely revolve around abortion. She went on Call Her Daddy, and almost the entire 45-minute episode was about abortion, with a couple minutes sprinkled in here and there about the economy. And, mothers, wives, they're sitting there thinking, is my husband going to be shipped off? Is my son going to be shipped off? What's going to happen to them overseas? What's going to happen to us here at home? Are our daughters going to be protected? And that was representative here. I thought it was really great the way that they allowed these women to ask important questions.
Yes, and I'm glad the issue of, for instance, crime and especially illegal immigrant crime came up during this. I want to play. There's a woman who said she has a son at the University of Georgia who was on campus the day that Laken Riley was murdered. Here's how that exchange went.
Furthering the discussion on immigrant crime, along with liberal-run cities where crime is out of control, my son is a Georgia Bulldog. He was on campus the day Laken Riley was murdered. Terrifying for all those kids, right? I wanted to know, how quickly in a sanctuary city like they're calling Athens, Georgia, how quickly can you remove those threats to our society so that our children can go out on a run, as they rightfully should be able to do, in a park in the daytime by themselves? It should not be like that. And also, I was wondering, I watch television all the time. I see your ads. I don't see a lot of vocalness about these sort of crimes, these hideous crimes in your promotion. So I'm wondering why that is.
Well, we are into it. First of all, we are going to end all sanctuary cities immediately. We're going to end them because they're really...
Is that an executive order you do that with?
They're really... I can do it with an executive order. I'll have to do it with an executive order. You can do it with the Aliens Act of 1798. We can do things in terms of moving people out. We can move them out of the sanctuary cities. You have some liberal, crazy people that they fight. Normally you like to understand the opponent. Like in business, you want to understand what is the opposites. Why do they want this? You want to try and figure, why do they want open borders? Why do they want to do this? Why do they want sanctuary cities? Sanctuary cities are really meant for one thing, to protect criminals. That's what they become.
So he directly addressed her question. He even cited a relevant law, the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 specifically. And he said there are resources available by law to the President of the United States to get people out of the country. And Trump said, I'm going to do it. I don't know. Does it get much better than that? What else could he say?
Right, exactly. And, I was thinking about it as I was watching it. And one of the things that stuck out to me was, could you imagine Kamala Harris being able to cite any relevant law to any question that she's ever been asked?
No.
I just don't see that. And then second, specifically with, Halloween coming up, my oldest daughter has been asking me, hey, can I go trick-or-treating with my friends?
Yeah.
And it really depends on which family is being, is where she would go, because that's something we have to think about. I live in a border state. I live in Texas, and I live in a suburb outside of a blue dot in Texas, and there, thousands of illegal immigrants. We have similar to Aurora, Colorado, we have an entire apartment complex in Frisco, Texas, that's being taken over by, Venezuelan gangs. And you have to think about this when you think about your teenage daughters going out trick-or-treating in their outfits and all of these things. It's just a prime target for them to be picked up and taken. And so I think when mothers are talking about how your children should be able to go out on a run, they should be able to go out and walk, they should be able to go out and trick-or-treat without being fearful of their safety. And then for Trump to come in and say very strongly that he's just going to handle it, it's just going to be something that's his priority, I think that gives you a bit of a sigh of relief. Okay, maybe we're going to get this safety back in our country. And, we've had today all of the news breaking of the FBI quietly revising their violent crime statistics. And it's something that we've all seen. It's another example of those, don't believe your lying eyes. type of situation. And parents understand that it's unsafe for our children to be out there, and for Trump to come out and say unequivocally, I'm going to handle it, is exactly what mothers need to hear, because we need someone to come in and say that.
And it's also one of the reasons, if we're just being honest about why he's getting mounting support from men, although as I played audio earlier from CNN, it seems like the woman vote in the United States is staying about at the same proportions as it was in 2020, where women are much more likely to support the Democrat. That's certainly true of single women broadly. But things have not really changed that much since 2020. Meanwhile, men are dramatically moving in President Trump's direction. What do you think's going on?
You know, I think that they see him as the strength that's been stripped from them. He can come out and say these things that they all believe and think, and he gives them a chance, or like he's their voice in a sense where they've been quieted. And I think it's a really great movement in our country. A lot of things stem from, masculinity and their ability to be able to protect us. And so if they see a candidate coming out and saying it's okay to be a man, it's okay to be a traditional man, it's okay to care about the economy, care about safety, care about our foreign policy, and, I'm going to champion these issues, then they're rightly going to go over to his side. I think that it's going to take a while before women kind of bust out of this bubble. Trump put it really well, where he says the issue of abortion has been terrorizing our country for 51 years, and it really has. And I think that that's caught a lot of women in this trap. And I think it's going to take a generation in order to kind of fix that. But if we have men switching over, it won't be long till women do too.
I hope you're right. I did see there was a tweet today from a Democrat activist in Missouri. Her name's Jess Piper. She is the executive director of Blue Missouri, and she wrote the following thing on X today. She said, "White women, your vote is private. I don't care what kind of sign your husband has put out in your yard or what your pastor preaches on Sunday. You can vote your conscience. You can vote for your children and grandchildren. No one will know." So this Democrat activist is pretending like the whole country is living under the handmaid's tale, that women are slaves to their husbands and they're living in fear. But she says, don't worry. You can go into the polling place and you can vote in secret. Your husband will never know. What do you make of this messaging?
I find it to be so insulting, number one, to, like you said, to just try and pretend like every woman just has to follow her husband and whatever he says goes. That hasn't been true in our country since Bill Clinton was running for office. I mean, we saw how many women flocked to him. However, I think that it's something that the Democrats have to go to because they don't really have anything else. They sit here and they try and pretend like women are this subservient creature, which we know in our modern society is not true. We have the rise of the girl boss babe that, runs out and does everything that she wants to do and then comes home and is lonely and is starting to wake up and realize, like, maybe I should have gotten married younger. Maybe I should have, had a family. I would have been a little bit more happy than I am now and all of those things. Yeah. And I also think that it kind of shows how scared they are of women flocking over to Trump because they see his strength. And it kind of points to what I said earlier about how I don't think it'll be long till more women start waking up and moving over to the Republican Party, because if they weren't scared, then they wouldn't be saying those things. If they weren't scared that women were going to vote for Trump in ways that they didn't see before, then they wouldn't be going out and saying, you can vote however you want to, but what they really mean is vote for Democrats. And
also it's a really brazen attempt to divide families against each other.
Yeah.
In my world, my wife's politics are definitely influenced by the way I look at things and analyze them and talk to her. And my politics are absolutely influenced by what she experiences, what she thinks about, what she cares about when it comes to my kid. In other words, we're a team, and it should not come as any surprise that we actually share a lot of views because of what we've both learned by simply living, experiencing, and loving each other.
And communicating. It comes down to a breakdown in communication. They want to continue to sever the ties of the traditional family structure, whether it's with kids and, the agendas that they put against them, or the parents themselves by separating them into two separate categories. And you're exactly right on that.
It's amazing. So thank you for always being a beacon of sanity. Mary Rooke with the Daily Caller. So nice to talk to you today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
There's a gentleman called Howard Lutnick, a pretty successful businessman. He's a co-chair of President Trump's transition team. And he was on TV today on one of the business channels, and was asked about how Trump wants to hire people who are loyal to the country and loyal to the elected president. And he was like, obviously, it's common sense. Listen to this.
You said to the Financial Times, we're going to give people the role based on their capacity, what you're saying here, and their fidelity and loyalty to the policy as well to the man. Is that how you run your company? People have to be loyal to you?
Absolutely. Imagine working at Cantor Fitzgerald and saying, I'm disloyal to Howard Lutnick. Or
Well,
better,
can they disagree
how about all of
with
you?
you?
How about all of you look at the screen and say, to heck with Mike Bloomberg. Let's see how that goes. You'll be like, ta-ta.
Can they disagree with you?
You must disagree, but that's called challenge and conversation. That's what the Oval Office is all about. You bring in 5 people. I mean, Donald Trump loves conversation. He loves to get all sides of the idea. But then you make your choice and you go where the elected president of the United States of America goes. You go where Mike Bloomberg goes. If you work at Cantor Fitzgerald, you go where Howard Lutnick wants you to go. And anybody who says otherwise, I don't even know what they're talking about. This is like make-believe politics, right? You follow the man and you follow after the conversation.
Yeah, he's the guy voters chose. They didn't choose you to sabotage him. What an era we live in, where you just have to describe basic concepts to stupid liberals. It's 529. Hey, good afternoon to you. 535 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. We're all tracking the election very closely. Just 20 days now. Oh, my goodness. How's that possible? Just 20 days until November 5th. Election season continues. A number of states early voting. Virginia's been doing it for a while. Georgia started up yesterday with massive, massive turnout numbers. Washington Post headline, Georgia smashes first day early voting record. No signs of slowing Wednesday. They say more than 300,000 Georgians cast a ballot Tuesday for the November election. That's the first day of early voting, doubling the state's day one record. On Wednesday, there were no signs the pace was slowing down. More than 88,000 votes had been cast as of 11:30 a.m. this morning, according to data from the crucial battleground state. Gabriel Sterling, a top state elections official, posted on X that the numbers meant, quote, that we will break past the 500,000 votes cast today. That's 10% of the overall turnout that we saw in 2020. Big numbers. Now, people are trying to figure out what the heck this means. Whose party is benefiting from all of this? Now, we may have some indication in new polling data that is out today from Quinnipiac showing that President Trump has not a 1-point lead, not a 2. I'm not going to do the whole thing. It's going to take forever to get there. It's a 7-point lead. Donald Trump has a 7-point lead over Kamala Harris right now, according to the Q poll, Quinnipiac today. Shows Trump ahead of Harris with 52% support to her 45% among likely voters in the Peach State. I mean, just compare and contrast, in, if you will, something that's happening right now in Georgia. One, Republicans, at the urging of President Trump and certainly so many others, are saying, okay, I'm going to embrace early voting. I'm going to do it. I'm going to knock it out. And one of the things that's changed since 2020 is you've got a voter integrity law that came into place that actually made it much more believable in Georgia that the election system will be sound. Thank goodness. It's one of a handful of states that passed some dramatic improvements to their election laws. Georgia did do that. Back in 2020 and going into 2021, obviously, you did have all of the chaos around the Georgia election, and then subsequently in that election that resulted in 2 Democrat senators all of a sudden coming up from Georgia. Republicans were being discouraged by bad actors in that state, telling them, don't even bother voting. The election's going to be stolen anyway, so don't vote. And that was a stupid, stupid, stupid thing to say. And as a result, you ended up with 2 Democrats in Georgia. 2. Way to go, morons. That was a very bad move. That's not what's happening in Georgia right now. In Georgia, Republicans are definitely showing up, huge numbers, a lot of enthusiasm. The polling is reflecting it. That is great news for a crucial state. We'll keep tracking it. But that election integrity law, Georgia passes, and one of the things that changed, this always stood out to me, was the way that absentee ballots would be handled in Georgia. Previously, you know how they did it? When you fill out your absentee ballot and you mail it in order to verify your identity, you would merely sign the document. You signed it. It's me. And you put a signature on it. And then you ship it in. And then an election official in Georgia would stare at the ballot and go, yeah, that looks like it matches the signature we have on file. We'll go with that. That was it. So you asked some untrained person, not a handwriting expert, some election goon, looking and going, okay, we'll accept this ballot. That's kind of an arbitrary practice, isn't it? Is your signature the same as it was when you registered to vote? Is it the same? Maybe it is. I don't know. When I was a kid, I signed like I was learning cursive for the first time. I very gingerly wrote each letter. My first signatures were awful. Now they're super lazy. Now they're just but my signatures changed dramatically from when I was first registering to vote. In other words, if you're doing signature matching, it may not be the most exact science. So it's a bad system. It's a bad system, and it disenfranchises voters. So how did Georgia change it? Well, they said you've got to use your ID number when you submit your ballot. On your driver's license, your state issue ID, you make sure to write that in when you submit the ballot absentee so they can verify that you are who you say you are. Well, that's a great system, actually. Means you need voter ID, not just in person at the polls, but when you submit the ballot absentee. There's a voter ID requirement in Georgia. And it's worked great. In the ensuing elections since that change, black turnout was not suppressed in Georgia. It went up. More black voters were enfranchised by the improvement of that state's laws. That's a great story. And obviously demonstrates that the Democrats have been lying. Of course, you knew this, but it just adds the cherry on top to the fact that the Democrats have been lying about voter ID laws. Black people can't get voter ID. It's too hard. It's too expensive. They can't handle it. They don't have agency. This is the stuff the left has been saying, or at least implying, about black voters nationwide. Don't add a voter ID law. It'll hurt black voters. Which is so patronizing and condescending and is so loaded with racist garbage, I can barely get my arms around it. But that's what they've been claiming. And in Georgia, as that election integrity law was coming to pass, they were barking against it because they would prefer that our elections be untrustworthy. And then they try and use racial grievance as a means to maintain that. Do you remember that? Who could forget? Joe Biden literally making up new phrases for Jim Crow.
The Republican voters I know find this despicable. Republican voters, the folks outside this White House. I'm not talking about the elected officials. I'm talking about voters. And so I'm convinced that we'll be able to stop this because it is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle. I mean, this is gigantic, what they're trying to do.
So that was a massive load of horse crap. That's what that was. That was just dung. That was total garbage. Biden was lying. He was trying to divide people, trying to use race as a cudgel. It's about as despicable as it gets, actually. And what ended up happening? More black voters turned out to vote after that. More of them. More of them were enfranchised. What garbage Joe Biden spread. And now we're looking at it yesterday, too. Record turnout in the state of Georgia for day one of early voting. Put differently, more voters got a chance to have their voices heard than at any other time in day one voting in Georgia history. Yeah, Jim Eagle indeed. And he wasn't alone. It was people like Senator Raphael Warnock, who's also a reverend.
We are witnessing right now a massive and unabashed assault on voting rights, unlike anything we've ever seen since the Jim Crow era. This is Jim Crow in new clothes.
Jim Crow in new clothes, he says. Yesterday, record turnout in Georgia at the polls. Stacey Abrams, who's a big fan of dishonesty.
First of all, I do absolutely agree that it's racist. It is a redux of Jim Crow.
It's a redux of Jim Crow. She lied to you. Why are black voters going to Donald Trump? Why is that even happening? Maybe they're sick of your lies. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's what's going on. John Ossoff, also a senator.
Yeah, Reverend Al. I mean, this is the new Jim Crow. And we must pass H.R. 1, the For the People Act, and we must pass...
That's the Let the Federal Government Take Over the Elections Act.
H.R. 4, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, to end voter suppression.
That's for the United States Department of Justice. Once again, these are all designed to make the federal government take over local elections. This was Nancy Pelosi's plan. This is the left's plan to have central control over elections. They want the federal government to manage it because the states are much too diffuse. You realize that the benefit of a system where the states each handle their own election is that it is harder to run a con at the national level. This is great that the states run their elections, in other words. This is what we want. It's harder to run a vote rigging scheme at the national level if the states are divided up in the way they administer their elections. This is what you need in order to engender trust in the system and make sure that we have authentic elections across all of these states, and to make sure those states' voices are accurately heard. So there you have a number of Democrats. They lied about Georgia, and here we have record turnout in Georgia. There are no impediments to people voting. They're getting in line. They're enthusiastically casting their ballots, and they're attempting to dictate the outcome of the future of this country. And Democrats lied to them about what would happen to their state. Jim Crow 2.0. Jim Crow looks like Jim Eagle. This is Jim Crow in new clothes. This is a redux of Jim Crow. John Ossoff, this is the new Jim Crow. And, of course, let me emphasize one really important point. Jim Crow is what Democrats created. So they're now ascribing the sins of their own party. Remember, what can be unburdened by what has been. The sins of their own party, they're ascribing to Republicans. They're saying they're doing this. They're doing what we did. The racist thing we did, they're doing it now. And, of course, they're not. Republicans were not doing that. Republicans were making things better. So some interesting turnout data in Georgia as people are showing up. And just my hunch tells me that there's a tremendous amount of Republican enthusiasm. It's not just a hunch. We are seeing interviews with people. It's funny. I love when MSNBC and CNN go out and we were talking to voters, but we couldn't find any Kamala supporters. You heard any of these? There have been a bunch of these. They're really, some really, really funny ones going on. Kamala's still campaigning. She did her Fox News interview today. We'll be able to play some of that audio tomorrow on the program. She was asked today on a tarmac about black voters not voting for her, not supporting her. And on that tarmac, the reporter asked whether or not she agrees with Barack Obama's recent comments. President Obama, as a surrogate for Kamala Harris, was scolding black men for not supporting her enough. And a reporter asked, do you agree with that? Here's how that went.
President Obama's recent men may be hesitant to vote for you because you're a woman?
Let me first say that I'm very proud to have the support of former President Barack Obama. And I think that the important point that I will make over and over again is I don't assume to have the votes of any demographic locked down.
Notice she will not defend Obama. Isn't that great? So Obama gets out there. I got something I want to say to the brothers. Remember, he said that this Friday. He was, I want to say to the brothers. And then he hectors them. He says that you're not supporting her, and you should. She knows your struggle. She grew up like you, which was garbage, of course, because she grew up in Canada to two, well-to-do PhD parents, and then made hundreds of thousands of dollars in her very first jobs in government. And she's never had a real job in her life. That probably includes McDonald's, where she's been lying. All the evidence points to that she's lying about any job ever at McDonald's, ever. You see, President Trump is going to be working as a fry cook at McDonald's this weekend. You know about this, Dave? Yeah, President Trump. Dave looked at me like, really? President Trump, his campaign has announced that he will be working this weekend for a short time making fries at a McDonald's franchise. I think, obviously, the point of this is to call attention to the fact that he will have spent more time actually making McDonald's French fries than Kamala Harris ever did. What state is he doing this in? Is it Pennsylvania? Yeah, Pennsylvania. That doesn't surprise me. That makes a lot of sense. They're spending all their time in Pennsylvania, a lot of their money there. It's a big state. Both campaigns view it as must win. So President Trump is going to be working the French fries this weekend. Although, if you've been to a McDonald's, how hard is it to make the French fries? I think nowadays they've got timers and systems and things. I'm pretty sure even some McDonald's, I think they have like a machine that lifts it out for you and like dumps it right into the bucket. So it may just be the scooping. It's the salting and the scooping that's really the key thing. Yes, Kamala would screw that up. But President Trump is going to create some great footage and great audio that we will be able to bring to you next week as a result of his going to a McDonald's, which I have to say, it's not the healthiest thing, but he swears by that diet. He loves that McDonald's, doesn't he? He's a big McDonald's guy. He's a big Diet Coke guy. I did have the pleasure a couple times of going to the Oval Office. And, on the president's desk, they have, I think it's a kind of a multi-purpose button. President Trump would always joke that, pushing it, he wasn't launching nukes or anything. There's a little button on the Resolute desk. It's inside of a brown wooden box. It's like a raised wooden box, and there's a tiny little red button in the box. And when he would push it, he didn't even say a word. He would just reach his hand out, and he would push it. And he would ask people in the Oval Office, to include colleagues that I went with. I'm trying to remember who it was. Maybe Jeff Ingersoll, the editor-in-chief of the Daily Caller. One of us. We're sitting there, and President Trump ordered a Diet Coke by literally all he did was press the button, and a Diet Coke emerged. It arrived. Somebody walks through with a silver tray and a little glass with a presidential seal on it, full of Diet Coke, and delivers it to the Resolute desk as he's sitting there. And he would ask, he's like, "Do you want one?" He said he would ask people, "Would you like one?" And sometimes people would say yes. I know you would say yes, Corey, just for the experience. Corey's not a Diet Coke drinker. I guarantee you Corey would say yes just to watch it happen. Corey would be like, "Yeah, I'll take one." And he would press the button again, and yet another Diet Coke would come out. Somebody would come walking in the room with a Diet Coke. I'm not recommending this as a diet. I'm just reliving it. I'm telling you how funny it was. And that's great. I prefer a president who uses the Resolute desk button to order Diet Cokes than one that gets us into wars in other countries with it. I think that's a much better circumstance. You keep those Diet Cokes coming. Yeah, this question of what's going to happen should Trump win. Longtime political reporter Mark Halpern was on this week with Tucker Carlson. He had this to say.
I say this not flippantly. I think it will be the cause of the greatest mental health crisis in the history of the country. I think tens of millions of people will question their connection to the nation, their connection to other human beings, their connection to their vision of what their future for them and their children could be like. And I think that will require an enormous amount of access to mental health professionals. I think it'll lead to trauma in the workplace. I think there'll be some degree of. Are you being serious? 100% serious. 100% serious. I think there'll be alcoholism. There'll be broken marriages.
What?
Yeah. They think he's the worst person possible to be president, and having won by the hand of Jim Comey and Fluke in 2016, and then performed in office for 4 years and denied who won the election last time, and January 6th, the fact that under a fair election, America chose by the rules pre-agreed to Donald Trump again, I think it will cause the biggest mental health crisis in the history of America.
Hard to see how he's wrong, actually, unfortunately. Although I will say this idea that they'll look at it and they'll go, "Oh, Trump just won a fair election." That's not what they're going to say. They're going to say the election was rigged. That's the only reason Trump won it. Buckle up. We have some interesting days ahead. The great one, Mark Levin, up next.